memory lane. Um, I'm like remembering how I grew up. I grew up back in the '80s in a neighborhood that was a new development, and we had a 5 bedroom house, 3 floors with like an underground basement, and there was some families. Uh, it was a new development way before Centerville had expanded a lot. I don't even recognize it anymore. And I remember, let's see, so to the like, and everyone was super cool. It was like back in the day where you could like sleep outside and, in the middle of the day and be fine and drink from the hose, play outside with my sisters or with, the neighborhood kids. Like to the left of us was like John and Christina, and she was from Portugal, and then John had a garden. He was also like of that descent, like, and they didn't have any children. And I remember my mom told me that like she's like Christina would always invite you over because she always spoke very highly of you even when you were a child, and she'd always bring you over. She'd like take photographs, like her husband would take photographs of me and Christina baking, and she'd like take me to the kitchen and show me how to bake, and because my parents would be working, and I had two younger sisters who were twins. They're 3 years younger, and I'm trying to remember who else lived in the neighborhood. And then there was like Cheryl and Mike, and Mike was a cop. I'm trying to remember what Cheryl did. They didn't have any kids. They had two cats. One that was like an indoor cat. I don't know why I'm remembering all this shit. And they had an outdoor cat, Audie, named after the puppy Garfield. And I remember when my parents and I would get into a fight, my mom and I would get into it because she'd mouth off to me and I just wasn't taking it. And it has to be really, really mean to make me upset. And so I just go outside and cry on the porch. And I'd call Audie, I'd go, Audie, here, kitty, kitty. And he would literally come running in the middle of the night across the street and come and sit on my lap. And I would just sit out there and pet him. I'm trying to think who else lived in the neighborhood. I had a bunch of girlfriends I went to primary school that lived up the street. The Sterlings. And I hung out with Amanda. She was like my best friend. We did like everything together. We'd go for walks. We even hung out in high school. Her mom was from Puerto Rico. Her dad like worked for NASA. He was a white guy, really cool. He like showed me a bunch of really cool equipment in their basement. I was like, whoa. I was like, what does that do? And he like was showing me. I was like, whoa. And then let's see, then the Philippines. That was crazy. They had two daughters that were older than me. Because my mom would always be like, go to the Philippines if you have any problems when you're babysitting your sisters. I'm like, oh my God. And the wife, I'm trying to remember her name, but Rob. I think Rob was her husband. He was also a police officer. And, but I remember talking with her as well. Because I think go to the neighbor's house all the time, just hang out, I know we'd be homeless, whatever. But like, she was very, very like soft spoken and very gentle as well. And like, I remember growing up in a really, really friendly neighborhood. And my family would go over to like, the Peaks house because my mom and Cheryl were like best friends. And at some point, and we'd have like Super Bowl Sunday, and they'd make, you know, dip and food, and we'd all grill out and hang out. And that was back in the day. So like a couple years later, I don't know if it was like the early '90s. I remember being still in like maybe third or fourth grade, and we had gotten a security system. I think this was before ADT came out. I'm not quite sure. I could be wrong. But it was some type of security burglar system. That was like all the new craze. And my dad's like, okay, Heather, you pick the password. And I was like, okay. And so, but sometimes I'd like, be coming in from school, like a latchkey kid, and I'd come in from school and I'd like be putting my book back down. And then I didn't do the code in time enough, so it would start like going off, and it was like loud, and I'd be sitting there as a kid, like So like Rob would come over or Mike would come over and be like, "Are you okay, Heather?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "What's the password?" And they're like, "Put the password in." And I'm like, "Oh," and I get scared, and they'd like deactivate it or whatever. And I remember Mike across the street telling me like, "Heather, look, there are good people and bad people in this world." And I think Rob may have said something about it too, because they noticed that our parents were. They were like there, but they weren't. And it was weird. I don't know. And he was like, "Look, there are good people and bad people." He's like, "There's good cops and bad cops." He goes, "I would not be telling you this. I'm telling you this because I care and I see that you are a bubbly child and you are delightful." He goes, "I just want you safe." And I'm like, "Dude, thank you." And he's like, you know, it was just very interesting about how much influence like I've had even in my childhood, like experiences of living life back in the 80s and 90s, and how much life has changed. I'm like, do people still get together and have Super Bowl Sunday parties and cook for each other and actually enjoy each other's company and have nice discussions about positive things? I'm like, does this still happen? I hope so. I think it does. But it was just weird walking down memory lane back in the 80s in Centerville. Good times. All right. Have a good day.